Okay, this is part 2, chapter 2 of Kierkegaard's Works of Love. He starts it off with a quote from 1 Corinthians 13:7. Love believes all things. And Kierkegaard is going to add to that statement, and is never deceived. Love believes all things. Frivolity, inexperience, simplicity believe everything that is said. Vanity, conceit, self-satisfaction believe everything flattering that is said. Envy, spite, corruption believe everything evil that is said. Mistrust believes nothing at all. Experience will teach that one acts most prudently by not believing everything, but love believes all things. Since mistrust believes nothing at all, it does just the opposite of what love does. Through living in the world long enough, because of mankind's penchant for dishonesty, we learn that it is foolish to trust people, and we think we are better off going through life assuming everyone is untrustworthy. This might be a shrewd course of action for someone who is not concerned for anything outside of their own desires. But for someone who is concerned about others, this course is in opposition to love. What then is the deep secret of mistrust? It is a misuse of knowledge, a misuse which straightway wishes in one breath to link its conclusion, an interpretation, to something which as knowledge is entirely true. What mistrust says or presents is really only knowledge. The secret or falsity lies in this, that it straightway converts this knowledge into a belief, as if it were therefore eternally certain and absolutely decided that when knowledge is given, the conclusion is also decided. Here he says that mistrust is a misuse of knowledge. Why? Because when we know someone has done something, that is knowledge of their behavior. That is one thing. But from that knowledge, we come to all kinds of conclusions about why that person did what they did. This is misusing our knowledge because we do not know anyone's motives or how they could justify doing whatever it was that they did. The problem is that we turn our knowledge into a belief, something that cannot be proven one way or another, and this is unjustified. This is what I believe Jesus is referring to when he says, quote, "Judge not, lest you be judged," saying that God will judge us as we judge others. This isn't to say that we don't call out evil. It just means that we're not to judge others' motives for what they do. It is also worth keeping in mind that we can also interpret reality in a very subjective way, even if we are experiencing an event firsthand, so that even our apparent knowledge is biased. Then there is the massive problem that media, the news, and history is basically always propaganda to one degree or another, because it is always putting forth a certain point of view. These realities should make us very reluctant in judging, something the scriptures routinely warn about. Whereas from the same knowledge, on the basis of belief, one can conclude, suppose, and believe the very opposite. Mistrust says, quote, "Deception stretches unconditionally as far as the truth, falsity unconditionally as far as honesty. There is no unconditional criterion of truth or of honesty and integrity. So it is with love. Hypocrisy, artifice, wiliness, and seduction stretch unconditionally as far as love does, and they can imitate true love so strikingly that there is no absolute criterion, because in every expression of truth or of true love there exists the possibility of deception, which corresponds to it exactly," unquote. And so it is, so shall it be, precisely because existence will test you, test your love, or whether there is love in you. For this very reason, with the help of the understanding, it presents you with truth and deception as two equal possibilities in contrast to each other, so that there must be a revelation of what is in you, since you judge. That is, since in judging you choose. Here he uses deception as an example of how someone's behavior can be. Here he uses deception as an example of how someone's behavior can be interpreted positively or negatively depending on our interpretation. He says that deception can stretch just as far as the truth, meaning that someone can make all the appearances of, let's say, loving someone, when in reality they do not. He's saying that every act that could show love could just be deception. So you never really know what someone's motive is. The upshot of this is that we can never know someone's heart, so we will always choose how we see them. And if we are to be loving, in order to build them up, we should assume love is present within them. He says that existence presents us with truth and deception as two equal possibilities in order to test our hearts, to test how we judge others. For this very reason, existence must be so arranged that you do not, with the aid of certainty and knowledge, slink out of revealing yourself in judging or in the way you judge. When deception and truth are presented as two equal possibilities in contrast to each other, the decision is whether there is love or mistrust in you. Love is the very opposite of mistrust, and yet it is initiated in the same knowledge. Only in conclusion, in decision, in faith, to believe all things or to believe nothing, are they directly opposite to one another. When love believes all things, it is not at all in the same sense as frivolity, inexperience, simplicity, which believes all things on the grounds of naivety or ignorance. No, above all, love knows better than anyone else everything that mistrust knows, yet without being mistrustful. We do not believe what we believe based on knowledge alone. This is true of every aspect of life, because we, as limited creatures, do not possess all knowledge, not even close. This is especially true in regard to knowing the heart of someone else, which is why we always choose what we believe about others. We can believe all things, believe there is love within someone. And this is not a childish naivety. The one with a mature Christian love knows how unworthy people generally are of being trusted, but they still choose in faith to trust them anyway. Are we then setting ourselves up for disappointment? This he will address a little bit later. Now, these next couple of quotes are part of a section where he's going to show that we can never know if the person saying them is the most trusting or mistrusting, and because both can say the same things with different beliefs. Yeah, so when you hear these next couple phrases here, we have to think, is the person saying them the most trusting person or the most mistrusting person? Because because if we're going to just have knowledge, like we're just going to take these statements, it's up to us. The statements are ambiguous. I mean, they're saying something, but you can't know whether the person saying them is the most trustful or most mistrustful, because you, with the knowledge, are actually determining what you believe. Is it not true that one man never completely understands another? But if he does not understand the other completely, then it always remains possible that what is most indisputable could still have a completely different interpretation, which, mark well, would be the true interpretation. All patient, and in the spiritual sense, passionless observers who expertly seek understanding by piercing the inner man inquiringly and deeply, these very ones judge very cautiously or abstain from judgment entirely, because enriched by observation, They have an enlarged conception of the enigmatic world of the hidden, and because, as observers, they have learned to rule their passions. Only superficial, impetuous, passionate men judge straight off, men who do not know themselves, and consequently do not know that they do not know others. Those who know, those with insight, never act this way. The difference between man and man, how infinite. Within the race, every individual is essentially different or unique. This superiority is the really human superiority. And then here's the last of those sections of quotes, where we're to determine who's saying them, the most trusting person or the most mistrusting person. Yes, if it were not so, that the single human being, honorable, upright, respectable, God-fearing, can under the same circumstances do the opposite to what another person does, one who is also honorable, upright, respectable, God-fearing, then the God relationship would essentially not exist, not in the deepest sense. If one could, with unqualified truthfulness, judge every human being and according to an established universal criterion, the God relationship would essentially be done away with. Then everything would turn outward, fulfilling itself paganly in political or social life. Then to live would become much too easy, but also exceedingly empty. Then exertion, or the deepening of the self, would be neither possible nor required. And yet precisely in the most difficult collision of infinite misunderstanding, the God relationship in a man develops. And so, just going off those statements, we don't know whether the person saying them is the most trusting type of person or the most mistrustful. And he's just using that as an example to show that when we merely have knowledge, which is we never have full knowledge. And so because of that, it's always us who are coming to the conclusions about people's motives. And so it's up to us what we choose. And and then just some commentary on those statements themselves, because I do think he's also saying those statements because they are pertinent to his point about this whole chapter, the point he's trying to make throughout this whole chapter. So, we can never fully know another person. And the part we don't know could actually hold the key to why they did something that we judge them for, and thereby make whatever our previous judgment of them was incorrect. Now, this is part of a section where he is asking us to judge whether what is being said comes from a trusting or mistrusting person. So if a mistrusting person is saying this, all these previous statements, then they are judging that the behavior in question could have a deceitful, nefarious purpose. On the other hand, if the person saying this is a trusting person, then they are judging that the behavior in question has an explanation that shows a positive motivation for why the other person did what they did. This statement could be made by either a mistrustful or trusting person. With a lack of knowledge, we judge by what we choose to believe. It is the same with all of our judgments of others, which are also judgments made without complete knowledge. Those who truly have insight into just how much complex, deep, and meaningful content resides hidden in the inner world of every person judges others very cautiously, if they judge them at all. There are an innumerable number of factors that can determine how a particular person sees the world and makes decisions, and only God understands all of these considerations, and thereby is the only one who can be their judge. The rest of us would do well to refrain completely from judging or judging very cautiously when we must make judgments. People who do not know themselves also think that they know the hearts of others. These ignorant ones are those who make hasty judgments of others. Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? When we cannot even understand our own wicked hearts, it is a show of extreme hubris when we believe that we can know the hearts of others. Yeah, another one of those comments. He talked about within the race, every individual is essentially different or unique, in that this is the real superiority that humans have over animals. Here he says that the real superiority of man over the beast is that each individual in the human race is unique. Even amongst a certain species of animal, there can be great differences among the individuals in that species. So how much greater can the differences be amongst individual human beings? Yeah, and then about that section that I already read, where he says that because we're so unique. Yeah, he says, yes, if it were not so that the single human being, honorable, upright, respectable, God-fearing, can under the same circumstances do the opposite to what another person does, who is also honorable, upright, respectable, God-fearing, then the God relationship would not essentially exist, not in its deepest sense. This is the last quote that is part of the section where he is quoting an unknown person, and is saying that it is completely ambiguous as to whether the person saying this is the most mistrustful or the most trusting person, and that we must decide how to judge the statements that are made. First, let's address what is said. The person here is saying that two people who are both upright, honorable, and God-fearing can actually do the opposite of what the other does in a given situation, because each has an individual relationship with God that leads them to make unique decisions. He says that if this could not happen, then there would be no such thing as an individual relationship with God, and everyone could be judged by a universal criterion. Now Kierkegaard asks, who said this? The most mistrusting or the most trusting person? Both could have uttered these past phrases. Kierkegaard is showing that our beliefs dictate how we interpret reality when we don't have absolute knowledge. Yeah, he says, now can you tell me who said this? No, it is an impossibility. It is completely ambiguous. The most mistrustful and the most loving person, as far as knowledge is involved, could equally well have said it. No human being has said this. It is non-humanly spoken. Knowledge places everything in the category of possibility, and to the extent that it is in possibility, it is outside the reality of existence. The individual, first of all, begins his life with ergo, with faith. But most men do not even faintly notice that in one way or another, at every moment of their lives, they live by virtue of an ergo, by a faith. So carelessly do they live. In knowledge, there is no decision. Decision, the determinedness and determining characteristic of personalities, is first in ergo, in faith. Knowledge is the infinite art of equivocation, or the infinite equivocation. Knowledge is infinitely detached. The mistrustful person and the lover have knowledge in common. And neither is the mistrustful person mistrustful because of knowledge, nor is the loving person loving because of knowledge. But when a man's knowledge has placed contrasting possibilities in equilibrium, and he wants or has to judge, then what he believes in becomes apparent, who he is, whether he is mistrustful or loving. Only very confused and inexperienced people think they can judge another person on the basis of knowledge. For something to be equivocal, it must be open to two or more interpretations. And that is always what knowledge is, because we never have complete knowledge. Because we don't have complete knowledge, we all live by faith, whether we want to admit it or not. And what we choose to believe shows what kind of people we are. Here in the world, it is not stupid to believe ill of a good man. Indeed, it is superciliousness, whereby one gets rid of the good in a convenient way. But it is stupid to believe well of an evil person. Therefore, one guards himself, since one so greatly fears of being in error. On the other hand, the lover truly fears being in error. Therefore, he believes all things. Here he says that the world has no issue believing the good man to be evil, because the world's pride likes finding reasons for removing the good from society. But the world also, ironically, does find it stupid to believe well of supposedly evil people. But the one who truly loves is so concerned about incorrectly judging someone as evil that they assume the best in them. They believe all things. The world, being evil, presents everything as evil. But as the Apostle Paul has said, quote, "To the pure, all things are pure, but to the defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure, but both their minds and their consciences are defiled." That's Titus 1:15. The Lord said in Matthew 6, quote, "The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is evil, your whole body will be filled with darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness?" How we see the world is a reflection of us, not the world. Knowledge does not defile a man. It is mistrust which defiles a man's knowledge, just as love purifies it. Scripture warns against judging and adds, "Lest you be judged." It still seems as if at times one might judge without being judged in return. But this is not the case. At the very moment you judge another person or criticize another person, you judge yourself. For to judge another means ultimately only to judge oneself or to reveal oneself. When we judge another, we reveal what is in our hearts. Just as when we are merciful, God shows mercy to us. That's Matthew 5:7, James 2:13. So yeah, just as when we are merciful, God shows mercy to us. In the same way, when we judge others, God sees to it to judge us. However greedy a man might be for judging, if he knew what it is to judge, how slow he would become. To believe nothing is right on the border where believing evil begins. The good is the object of faith, and therefore one who believes nothing begins to believe evil. To believe nothing is the beginning of being evil, for it shows that one has no good in him, since faith is precisely the good in a man. It is not sufficient to simply believe nothing about others, because this is where one begins to be and believe evil. Only the good is the object of faith, and when one has no good in themselves, they have no faith in its existence either. So he's talking about the person who believes well of others. He's saying, if he erred by believing too well, to believe the good is in itself a blessing. In love, to believe the good is indeed no error. One rather errs, therefore, by not doing it. Hold on a second. That frivolity, inexperience, and simplicity believe everything is an understanding, a foolish understanding. In love, to believe everything is a choice through the power of love. Instead of using its keenness to strengthen itself in believing nothing, as mistrust does, love uses its keenness to discover the same thing, that deception and truth both stretch just as far. and now concludes in the power of faith which it has. Ergo, I believe everything. Even if one is not deceived by others, I wonder whether he is not deceived anyway, most terribly deceived, precisely by himself, by believing nothing at all, deceived out of the highest, out of the blessedness of devotedness, out of the blessedness of love. No, there is only one way to assure oneself against never being deceived. That is to believe all things in love. One who chooses to believe nothing at all, because they do not want others to deceive them, actually ends up being deceived out of apprehending and experiencing the highest existence can offer. Yeah, so they end up being deceived out of apprehending and experience the highest thing that existence can offer, the blessedness of loving. To continue in love, you will never be deceived out of the blessedness that is found in loving others. To be deceived out of loving is to truly be deceived. The one who loves others, and out of this love assumes the best in others, even if they are found to be wrong about them, will not in the truest sense be the one who is deceived, because to be deceived means to not love. When one loves, they exist in blessedness, regardless of the state of those who are loved. Therefore, true superiority can never be deceived if it remains true to itself. But in relationship to everything which is not love, therefore in relationship to every deception, true love is unconditionally superior. Consequently, it can never be deceived if in believing all things, it remains true to itself or continues to be true love. True love, of love in and for it, true love, of love in and for itself, is of this blessedness in itself. To be deceived signifies simply and solely to quit loving, to be carried away to the point of abandoning love in and for itself, and in this way to lose its intrinsic blessedness. For only one deception is possible in the infinite sense, self-deception. Everyone who essentially and decisively affirms that he has been deceived this way in love, that he has lost the best, even everything, thereby declares himself to be a self-lover. For the best is love in and for itself, and this one can always keep if one is a true lover. Even if he succeeds in securing himself against every deception through these means, he and all like-minded persons are nevertheless essential. So he's talking, that phrase, he just skips to talking about the person who doesn't trust because they don't want anyone to deceive them. He's saying, even if he succeeds in securing himself against every deception through these means, he and all like-minded persons are nevertheless essentially deceived by having their lives in the world, which is the illusion, in the world where all are essentially victims, whether one deceived grumbles about someone else or the other person brags about not having been deceived. Everyone who complains about being deceived in loving another is showing that their love is self-love and not the divine love that loves for the sake of love itself. If we expect our love to be returned, then our love is just a means for us to be loved. Or if we go about life believing nothing, so that nobody can ever deceive us, we are likewise self-consumed. In both cases, this is to be caught up. In both cases, this is to be caught up in the empty futility of having our end goals being focused towards this life, which pursuits are always temporary, self-serving, unsatisfying, and of no lasting eternal value. To know within oneself, and in truth that one is not deceived, and still find it stupid that one appears to have been deceived. What does one call this? One calls this vanity, or what in this case is the same, one calls it not yet being completely the true lover. In a certain sense, the lover is quite aware if someone deceives him, but not by being willing to believe it, or by believing all things, he perseveres. Let me start that one over. In a certain sense, the lover is quite aware if someone deceives him, but by not being willing to believe it, or by believing all things, he preserves himself in love, and in this way is not deceived. Therefore, one sees here an example of the foolishness, the irrationality, of the bustling which thinks that knowing is superior to believing. For it is precisely believing all things which secures the lover, who in a certain sense knows that he is deceived, against being deceived. One cannot deceive the true lover, who believes all things. For to deceive him is to deceive oneself. Indeed, what is the highest good and the greatest blessedness? Certainly it is the love in truth. Next to this, to be loved in truth. But then it is impossible to deceive the lover, who precisely by believing all things abides in love. If it were possible to deceive someone in money matters in such a way that the so-called victim kept his money, would he then be betrayed? This is precisely the case here. The deceiver, however, deceives himself. He does not love, and thereby he has deceived himself out of the highest good and the greatest blessedness. The one who truly loves others cannot be deceived, because to be deceived, you have to be tricked out of what is best for you. The best for any person is to remain in a state of loving others. So the person who loves even a deceiver is not deceived. Yet it is the deceiver who is deceived, because they have forfeited what is the very best for them in this life and the next, to love others. The deceiver naturally succeeds in becoming loved. Naturally, yes, the deceiver thinks and must naturally think that this is due to his cunning, his intrigue, and art. Poor deceiver, he does not perceive that he is dealing with the true lover, who loves him because the true lover loves all men. In what meaninglessness the deceiver's contemptibleness is now trapped. The deceiver, therefore, has cunningly gotten the lover to love him. But this is just what the lover is infinitely willing to do. The deceiver has presumably fooled him by not loving in return. But the true lover regards the very requirement of reciprocity to be a contamination, a devaluation, and loving without reward of reciprocated love to be the highest blessedness. Who then is deceived? The true lover loves all people and does not desire this love to be returned, because in that case their love is genuine and pleasing to God. But those who would like to deceive this person into loving them without loving them in return, like for instance a romantic partner, how could they actually in any way harm this true lover? If it turns out that the true lover loved the deceiver without the deceiver loving them in return, then this is only to the true lover's benefit, because loving selflessly without any benefit to oneself is to love purely, and this is blessed by God. To deceive in this way, is it not like calling it stealing to slip money into a person's pocket? The true lover has become richer because for every additional person he gets to love, and for every additional time he gives his love with no claim of reciprocity, he becomes richer. Only the love which demands reciprocity, consequently the untrue love, can be deceived by remaining ignorant of the fact that the object is unworthy. If an insane person wishes to prove to one who is sane the rightness of his insane thoughts, and if in a certain sense the demonstration succeeds, is not this the most appalling of all? Is this not a kind of mercilessness on the part of existence? For if it did not succeed, the insane person might nevertheless in this way become aware of the fact that he was not insane. Let me start this over. I read this wrong. If an insane person wishes to prove to one who is sane the rightness of his insane thoughts, and if in a certain sense the demonstration succeeds, is not this the most appalling of all? Is this not a kind of mercilessness on the part of existence? For if it did not succeed, the insane person might nevertheless in this way become aware of the fact that he is not sane. But now it is hidden from him, and his insanity is quite incurable. So it is with the deceiver. But this is not merciless, but rather righteous punishment upon him for the success of his deception, and in this way his very perdition. Here he is comparing the deceiver to an insane person who has convinced a sane person of the viability of their insane thoughts. In the same way as this, a deceiver can convince someone to love them by acting like they are someone they are not. But the tragedy for both the insane person and the deceiver is that because they have convinced the sane or loving person with what they have put forth, the very ones who could have awakened them to their deplorable state, they are actually now doomed to remain insane in the case of the one, and in a state removed from blessedness in the other. How severe, how serious and full of justice is existence. Yet insane deceivers do not perceive it, and this precisely is the judgment upon their lives that leads to their perdition. To come to one's senses, to be brought to repentance, is the greatest mercy. But to be allowed to remain in one state of degeneration, this is righteous judgment upon one's pride and rebellion. If to love is the highest good and the greatest blessedness, if the lover, just by believing all things, continued in the blessedness of love, how should he then be deceived in time or in eternity? No, there is in time and in eternity only one possible deception in relation to true love: self-deception, or giving up love. And there we conclude. We cannot ever know the heart of another, and therefore cannot ever be justified in making judgments about their motives. We are not to love based on the worthiness of the one loved. The one who continues to love cannot be deceived, even if the person they are loving is a deceiver. The only one who can be deceived is the one who stops loving, because when we stop loving, we lose the blessedness from God that is found when we exist in a state of love.